My church is getting ready to host its annual Vacation Bible School. It's like a kid's day camp if you're not familiar. And they need a balance scale made for it. But not just any balance scale. A giant balance scale that can hold a 5-gallon bucket at each end. The idea is the kids will bring in their loose change and throw it into their team's bucket. Then at the end of the night, you'll weigh the buckets and the team with the heaviest bucket wins.
Hooray!
Now I have volunteered to build this scale and I'm pretty excited about it. However, we are on a bit of a time constraint. Because of my work, I only have 2 days to build it. But not to worry, I already have the plans drawn, so let's head to the hardware store, pick up our supplies, and get started. So I'm going to start by marking the sides of the balance onto the plywood and cutting it out. I'm then going to take our two 2x4s and cut down 2 pieces that run the full length of our sides. And then I'll drill a 1-inch hole at one end of each of them. Just like that. Now we only need to do this for one of them, but I'm going to choose one lucky board and drill a 1/8 inch hole all the way through the side of it. I'm going to drill about 6 inches up from the bottom, and it's not going to be centered in the side, but it's going to favor the front. Not really worth explaining why at the moment, but it will all make sense in the future. I'll go ahead and mark this one with an S, so we'll know it's special. We can then go ahead and fasten these onto our side pieces, hole facing up. In the video you can see after I glue it, I nail it down, but this is just to hold it in place so I can come back and drop some screws. We really don't want to leave this all up to the nails. And now we'll repeat for the other side. Now I'm going to take this pine board I have and just cut a series of 3/4 inch square strips out of it. We can then cut them down to length. We can then fasten them onto the sides and bottom of our side pieces. We're going to want to attach the sides with a 3/4 inch inset to them so we can attach another piece of plywood there, but the bottoms we're going to mount flush. Just like that. And now for the other side.
Ooh, fancy!
We are now going to want to take the side that does not have the special little 2x4 on it and cut 2 channels into it. We're going to want to cut 1 channel on each side of the 2x4 at the bottom of the piece. Each channel needs to be 1 inch wide and 4 inches long. On to the foot pedal. Now right here I got me a piece of oak wood, and so what I'm going to do is cut into a 3/4 inch square strip. I'm then going to cut that strip into 2 10-inch long pieces, drill 1/8 inch hole into each of them, a 1/2 inch from the end, and then round that one side on the sander. I'll then take my oak piece again and cut that into an 1.5 inch wide strip, and then cut 2 pieces out of that strip. One of them we just want to be 5 inches long, pretty straightforward, but the second one we want to cut an 1.5 inch tall triangle out of. Now if you've done that correctly, first of all, that's a miracle, it should look something like this. Now, I know I have 2 5-inch long pieces here, but just forget you ever even saw this guy, okay? He's dead to you. So first, I'm going to mount this shark fin onto the center of our 5-inch piece using the heftiest glues and screws I've got. I'm then going to attach our 2 10-inch long pieces to the bottom of it. We're going to want our rounded pieces to stick 2 inches out of the back side of the fin piece. I know that doesn't make any sense. Just try your best to mimic what I'm doing. I'm sorry, people. And there you go. Looks like some kind of rejected F-Zero spacecraft. And now we can just throw this aside and forget about it. We'll come back for it later. Moving on. On one of our scrap pieces of plywood, I have drawn what is going to become our pendulum. And so now our next step is to cut it out. Beautiful. But now we need an arm to attach the pendulum onto. And so I'm going to take our 2x4 again and cut down a 4-foot, 2-inch long piece, I know, weird measurement, and then attach our pendulum to the center of that. As we glue and drop some screws into this, it is very important that it's not only perfectly center, but also perfectly square with the arm. If we get this even just a little bit off, it'll throw the whole balance off. But once everything's squared and fastened together, I'm going to take my drill and an upside down dowel pin jig and drill a perfectly straight pilot hole through the center of both pieces. I'll then take my inch wide drill bit that we used earlier and widen the hole. The whole point of the dowel pin jig in the pilot hole is to just get the 1-inch hole to be as straight as it can possibly be. Now in testing this, I wasn't quite satisfied with the amount of movement we got, and so I'm going to shave a little bit off the pendulum. Well, it moves a lot more, but now the pendulum's getting stuck, and so I'm going to add some bumper pieces to prevent this from happening. And look at that, like a dream. And while we're here, let's go ahead and mount our foot pedal into place. That's what that hole we drilled all the way through the special little 2x4 is for. And as you can see, the shark fin from the foot pedal fits perfectly within the notch of the pendulum, and now it's all starting to make sense. Now we are almost ready to begin putting it all together, but we need one more crucial piece, the base plate. And so for this, I'm going to cut a 2x4 foot piece of plywood, circle cut the corners with my jigsaw, and then round the whole top of it on the router. With that, we can now mount the sides onto the base plate. We're going to want the sides mounted about 5 1/4 inch apart from each other, and of course centered in the middle of the base plate. As you'll see in the video, after I fasten down one side, I then unfasten it and go and fasten down the other side. This is just because it's very hard to do precision work in a 5-inch gap. But once we're ready to fasten them both in place, the side with the notches cut into it should fit perfectly over the foot pedal. And hula lula it does. Now here's an inch dowel I cut down to 5 1/4 inch, and 2 washers I made for it out of masonite. So we're simply going to slide the dowel into the pendulum, slap a washer on each side, and then drop the whole thing into place, making sure the plywood pendulum is touching the special 2x4. Speaking of our pendulum, you can see here it is not straight, and that's simply because our balance isn't square because we haven't put on the sides yet. But first, we need to attach this extension spring. I'm going to attach one end of it to the inside front of the pedal, then extend it until it's got some tension and mount the other end into the frame. As you can see, not only does it lock in place, but because of the curve of our pendulum, it can even push the pedal out of the way to relock itself. So now let's cut out those sides and square this thing up like we mentioned earlier. These are pretty straightforward, but we do have to cut a 13-degree bevel on each end so it matches the angle of the balance, and cut out a notch at the top for the pendulum arm to be able to pass through. But once that's done, we can go ahead and drop it in place and fasten it down, and then it's just a matter of mirroring it for the other side. And those handful of screws we put on the inside are really not enough to hold this, so now that it's square, I'm going to go ahead and drop it onto its side, and send several hefty screws through the base plate into the side frame of our balance. These, in addition to the screws we do have on the inside, should help guarantee that this never goes anywhere. Now this is supposed to hold a 5-gallon bucket on each end, and as you can see, it doesn't do that very well at the moment, so let's see if we can change that. To do this, I'm going to take some of our scrap plywood and cut out 4 3.5-inch square blocks. I'm then going to round one side of them on our sander, and then glue and nail them onto the sides of our balance arm. And screws aren't necessary for this, the glue will hold just fine. After that, it's just a matter of taking our circular saw and cutting out notches for the bucket's handle to go in. With that, we only have one thing left to finish, the foot pedal. I'm pretty hot and tired at this point, I'm not gonna lie. It's like 115 degrees outside, and so I just found some scrap 3/4 inch dowel and I'm gonna screw them on. And with that, our balance is finally finished. What's up, nerds? So here's your VBS balance we were talking about. I have these buckets filled with rocks. They're relatively heavy. They drop into the notch. drop into the notch, and then when you want to see what happens, you just push the lever. And then when you want it to be centered again, you just pick it up, and it finds home again. Real nice. I chose not to paint or stain it simply because I didn't have time. However, the church does plan to keep it around for a few years, so I imagine at some point it probably will get painted. With that, the only thing left to do is to pack it up, deliver it to church, and see what the kids think.
Alright, drum roll. This is gonna be the boys, this is gonna be the girls. Here we go. Oh! Alright, let's see who won. You cheated! You guys ready? Yeah!
I am quite pleased with it. I think it turned out well. Really, the only thing I would add to it would be paint, and all in good time. But hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this video, and if you did, feel free to hit the thumbs up and subscribe. But if you didn't, I hope your team's bucket's lighter. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to subscribe.